This is Educators Respond. This video and audio podcast series is dedicated to supporting educators as they respond to the COVID-19 crisis. The goal is to create conversation around how to effectively support the physical as well as social and emotional well-being of all members of school communities in Pennsylvania and beyond. In this episode, I speak with Lisa Harpster and Andy Wilson, teachers at State College Area High School, who together run the English Language Learner program in the school. In addition to discussing the current school situation for their students and what they are thinking about into the fall, we also discuss the amazing work that they are doing right now to support families of their students. These amazing educators are providing much needed support to families in serious need. They are delivering food and helping them to avoid evictions and helping them to pay utilities through financial support. If listeners are able to help with donations, I have included Lisa's email address in the episode description. Please consider making a donation to support these hard-hit families and students. So thank you so much for joining me, Lisa and Andy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about what you're seeing in your kind of virtual teaching, what you're thinking about in the future, and also what you're doing to support the families of your students. So thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
You're most welcome.
Thanks for having us.
And maybe we can start off with a little bit about who you are and your background and how you got into the role that you're in now. Lisa, would you maybe go first?
Sure. I have been teaching in the district for, I think this is my 12th year. And after moving away from State College for a while, I came back and did the PDS program where I interned with Linda Barton in the ESL classroom. So I was with Linda and Andy on a regular basis, as you know well, Kevin. And so during that time, I just, fell more in love with the international population, had always loved travel and learning about new cultures and tutored international students in high school and just loved it. So that year, Linda retired. I was thankful enough to get the job, and the rest is history. Andy and I have been working together ever since.
Which makes me one of the luckiest guys in the State College Area School District because I've been teaching for 25 years, and Linda Barton and I work together. I am the social studies side of the ESL department at the high school. Lisa is the English credit, and I do a course that provides the social studies credit for the kids. It's a job that is remarkably fun, but challenging all at the same time. You get to know the kids in a way that you may not when you're teaching 130 or more students. And so the job crosses from being a teacher into perhaps a guidance counselor at times as well. So you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said that you're the social studies credit and Lisa's the English credit in the program. But that in some ways doesn't capture half of what you do in that room, having worked in that classroom in terms of, working one-on-one with students, tutoring students, helping them in their other courses, making sure that kind of being an advocate for them within the school building. You all do a heck of a lot more than just those courses.
That's true. When a kid arrives from a school system that is so very different than what the United States, it takes someone to help navigate through all of the changes that have to occur inside someone so that they can be successful. And that really is what we're looking for is kids who may have been really super successful in their home systems, coming into a completely new environment, struggling, and then having to kind of battle through that struggle to end up really flourishing here in our system.
So what are the home cultures that are represented in the State College ESL community there?
Within the high school ESL classroom, in terms of full-time students this year, we're at like 40-ish. And I think we're around, this past year before COVID happened, we were around like 280, I think, on a district level, from pretty much all over the world. Of course, it always depends on what's going on politically and now health-wise in the rest of the world that kind of, you know, determines who filters into state college. But yeah, right, Andy? I mean, I think we have everybody we represent.
And I think another point to make is that Penn State is providing only about half of our population, if that. There's a lot of kids who would be the sons and daughters of visiting professors or PhD candidates who are here for a short period of time. That's about 50% of our population. And then the other 50% would be immigrants who are here in the United States to stay. And over time, over the 25 years that I've been here, we've seen some dominant languages appear. At one point it was Russian, at another it was Koreans, South Koreans, and then recently it's been a large Spanish immigration.
I remember when I was working in that classroom, it was a unique classroom environment. It was very personal. The students knew each other. When they came in, it felt like it was like a home for them and a very kind of safe space that they dropped in. In fact, there were some students we almost had to kind of push them out to the door to go to their other classes. And and that culture that you created within your classroom was so palpable, so obvious for anyone who walked in. And establishing that at the beginning of the year was a priority, and really kind of building that out throughout the year so that students felt like this was a safe place they could go to. And I'm sure this year was the same, but I'm kind of curious, what happened as you transitioned to an online or virtual curriculum this year?
What happened? I think there was an initial panic. And as we worked through the panic of trying to figure out how to best meet the needs of some of these students, we found that now some of these students have a lot of support at home and have academically minded parents. Some return to their countries. Some who already really struggle with learning how to, Andy always says that we have to teach kids how to do school a lot of the time. So we have a pretty big population this year that is what we're working on. So without the structure of the classroom, it is a lot harder to, you know, basically rewind and start from scratch. So find a translator who can communicate to the parent and the student, make sure they're set up with internet, and then see if they can actually access the information. So it's been, I don't know, Andy, would you say maybe 50-50 in terms of kids that have really stepped up to the plate and continue, and those that have kind of fallen off or need a lot of encouragement?
Right. I would say that the kids who were finding success in the classroom have, for the most part, been able to transition and have found success in this virtual space. But students who struggled either getting out the door of their home to get to school, or once they got to school, struggled with being able to read the assignments or being able to write, or were in transition. We had some students who had arrived maybe 4 days or 5 days before spring break,
Yeah.
and had joined our class, and then snap, everything just triggered. And we really have had a hard time folding them into our standard operating procedures and all of the things that we do. And so the kids who did school before have transitioned fairly well. The kids who needed all of the extra supports that the daily school program provides, they struggled and continue to struggle, which is going to mean those struggles are going to be there at the start of the school year in whatever form we take.
Yeah, I heard recently, and I think it's strongly worded, but perhaps true, that if you're grading student work right now, what you're grading is privilege.
Right.
And this idea that, you know, our students who were successful have been able to kind of transition, but for students who were struggling before, this is kind of doubled down from digital divide issues. And in your case, the cultural divide issues of making sense of what school is here, you know, and how we do it.
And I will say that I saw a post similar to that, and my first reaction is that's kind of what we always do anyway. And I think to really have that brought to the fore and to be even more cognizant of it is perhaps one of the silver linings in this whole thing, is for us to be able to have a conversation around that and what does it mean,
and really pick that up and make substantial change into the future, you know, and really address it perhaps is a goal going
right.
forward. Yeah, agreed. And so what are you doing academically with your students now? What does a day in the life of class in this year look like?
Well, for us, because of the timing of COVID, we were fortunate in that some of our long-term assignments were already underway. They'd already started their literature unit. They had already started their personal memoir. So that, in that sense, it has been easy to kind of pick up there. We just transitioned journals to online. That's for the upper classes. For the very beginner classes that are learning more the structure of school, and in that class we have at least one student who is illiterate in every language. We've gone to more of a, like I read a book to them, I show graphics to them, I record videos as if they're in the classroom. Anything that's like that they can watch that's not only words is helpful to our beginners.
I will also say that I made a conscious decision that I was not going to start throwing a whole bunch of new information, a bunch of new platforms in which the kids had to try and figure out where do I go and how do I read the instructions. I kept it simple, really, really simple, and just had them read a small amount, write a small amount, and watch and listen to the news and things that are going on. My own children are benefiting from excellent teaching. Some of the teachers that my kids have are just pouring themselves right into it, and there's lots and lots of fun stuff. I can see my kids when they're Zooming, engaged. That is when they let me show up in the background.
Get out, Dad.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other side of your work in terms of advocacy for your students within the whole school district and helping them navigate school, has that aspect of things continued?
I mean, the number one focus right now for all students, all people really, is health. And so the district has been, as I'm sure anybody that listens to this knows, they've been great about, giving food, about helping with internet. But the issue is, how do we get the information from the district that is offering it to these families who don't have any language to connect with them? So that is how it has continued. And to be honest, I would say in the first maybe 3 weeks, since we went online, that was much more focused than the academic piece. I mean, that was taking up the majority of our time, figuring out how do we get them food? How do we get them, what if they need their rent money? What if they need utilities? Are they safe? We've had 2 babies born in families during this time. So do they have baby clothes? How do they get diapers? They don't have transportation. So it's turned into more of a, I don't know, kind of like an out-of-school social worker than it was an in-school navigator.
And I think we have a significant portion of population whose financial existence was on a knife's edge. The savings accounts were emptied almost overnight. Rent was coming due. The pantries were not that full. And I think we recognized that without support, these folks are going to be either they're going to face long-term financial difficulties for sure. But my biggest concern was that they would be pushed out of their houses, pushed out of their apartments. That may not happen now during this emergency phase of COVID, but the long-term financial implications may make it such that they get behind in their rent, they're not going to be able to get caught up. And then once people are homeless or pushed out of their living arrangements, they lose the connection to school, and they lose that easy, well, nothing's easy with some of these families, but the more familiar avenue of communication and support. And so that to me is been the best part about this, is the community has risen up and taken under their wing about 20 families to make sure that there's going to be some financial support in their housing, and definitely lots and lots of trips to provide some food and transportation to those things.
And that project or that initiative kind of is what led me to reach out to both of you to talk with you and kind of hear more about what you were doing. I learned about it on Facebook through, you mentioned it, Linda Barton, who was previously in the English position within the district and retired. I heard from her that she said she's doing more work now to support families than she was when she was full-time employed with the district. And so these 20 families, could you give more detail on the kind of support that they're receiving?
I think as of this week, we're up to 23. I think we've had 3 new families enter this week now. So we were at 18 for a while, and then 20, and we're at 23. The community has given a lot. There are some local churches that are donating food. So they'll bring, one church will do deliveries directly to the people. The other church will do deliveries to Linda Barton's garage. And then we go over, and she and her family divide up the boxes. And then some of us are drivers, and we'll go over and deliver the food. The community has given also other food, diapers, clothing, beds, couches, etc. But honestly, the most useful thing has been money. We were able to cover the rents of, I think, 15 maybe families last month. But you know, in the beginning, there was a surge of donating, and unfortunately, their needs are not going away. So that's something we've been toying with now. How do we continue to provide what these families need so that they can keep their homes in terms of utilities and rent? And
the problem is that there is no money for some of these families coming in. No one is able to work. That is hopefully going to be alleviated in the coming weeks or months, and as people go back to work. But it may not be with the same number of hours. It may not be at the same hourly rate.
So initially, there was a lot of community response in terms of providing resources, both financial as well as food and other supplies. But what I heard is a kind of a concern that going forward, attention shift and communicating the message out that need is still present is critical.
yeah, it is. And I think it's a little, there's always kind of that fine line between like asking and asking and asking and asking. And, so I think it's balancing that too, figuring out, do we need to be strategic about the next time that we kind of roll out, okay, we now need money for what's the next month, June 1st rents, everybody,
So this wasn't an organization. You weren't a nonprofit who set out to support immigrant families, and that this is the project that's in front of you now. This was a group of educators who came together to respond to what was necessary or what's needed right now. So what you're talking about is kind of creating the infrastructure of an organization for ongoing support. That seems like a large undertaking.
The reason this is all going on is because Linda Barton is pretty amazing. She's continued to volunteer in our classroom and has, through that volunteer work, a connection to our students. And so she when this happened, said, oh, geez, there's a need. What can I do? And she didn't just stick her toe in, right? She jumped right in, and we jumped in as well. And you're right. It's not an official nonprofit with a structure of any kind. It is just a pure grassroots. Hey, there's a need. It went out on Facebook, and people responded. They opened up their checkbooks and their wallets, and they filled coffers for us to be able to help the most needy people in our community. Truly, lots of people who have permission to work, but because of their status, they have no access to any of the government programs of support. And those folks are here trying to earn a part of the American dream. And I think that need to help those folks achieve that is really admirable. And Linda's done a great job with that.
And the outcomes for those families without this kind of support, include food insecurity and the kind of short term, the inability to pay rent. And as you mentioned, if it moves to homelessness, then you have a complete disconnection with all those systems of support which are available. Even though they are limited in comparison to other communities, they'd be further limited in that situation.
Right. Or they pick up and leave a great community, and a community that they make valuable contributions to. So I think we just need to make sure we keep kids in their homes where they're safe, and we can keep an eye on them and help them.
Yeah, and at the end of this, I want to come back to how people in the community, people who are listening, can help and support and be able to provide some information on that. But just to move forward a bit and thinking forward. So into the fall, there's kind of a couple of options in front of us. We could be completely online. We could be in some sort of hybrid situation where some students are in the school and some are at home. We could be in a school system with extended breaks. In the case of an outbreak in one community, that community, is on shelter in place and everyone else is in school. Or we could be returned with, new protocols for health and safety. But along that spectrum, what are you thinking about in returning in the fall at this point, knowing that we don't have a crystal ball to know what the future is, but what are you thinking about at this point?
Well, on one end of that spectrum, you make me sweat when you start thinking about how do we do all of the things that we've done in the past in this new fully digital teaching. That I think it's going to be a monumental challenge that'll require us to rethink everything that we've been doing and how we go about doing that. I suspect it's going to be some type of a hybrid, which we can definitely figure out how to do that without the same kinds of full change that I think a digital program would make. But maybe I need to think about it some more. Well, I know I need to think about it some more.
Well, we all do, right? That's what we're thinking about all the time, and trying to prepare for one outcome, and then the next day we get new information, and now we're preparing for the other outcome, which I think is its own kind of stress to this situation. With your students specifically, are there particular needs that this will raise for them?
Yeah, I mean, the language and cultural barriers that these students have those are just an added layer that requires more support and more time and more nurturing.
One question that I like to ask everyone when I'm speaking with them is what intentions are driving your actions these days? And I've said before that I think the word goal is a little bit strange at this point because we don't know what the future is going to hold. And so setting goals, our goals are changing every day based on the new information. But what intentions are kind of leading your actions? And I think in some ways they're obvious. We can see your passion for supporting these students and their families. But I'm kind of curious how you would respond to that.
I think I mentioned earlier that I intentionally made the decision to have the last marking period of my class, this landing, this COVID landing at the end of this year, to be as soft on my students academically as I could, to make it so that they worked a little bit on their skills, but wasn't trying to drive the academic bus on that. The most important thing for me was that the kids felt secure and that they were able to deal with many of the problems that happened within their families. Maybe not problems, but issues that arose, whether students had to pick up and leave, go home suddenly, go back to their countries without a lot. So I didn't want to cause any more stress in their lives. My intention for this new year would be to make sure that they understood that we are there to support them in their journey, and that if it's a hybrid model, that we're going to figure this all out together, and that we would maintain that idea that we are the home base in the school, the place for the kids to come, to be comfortable, to talk about problems that they have, to solve issues that arise.
Yeah, and we know from research that one of the number one mitigating factors for trauma is having one caring adult in your life, or having caring adults in your life for children. And so I think that's a powerful intention to set in the forefront.
I think for me, it's, it's exactly what we're doing. It's, my intention is to make sure everybody's basic needs are covered. I think until we do that, all of the other stuff is secondary. So despite the amount of time and energy and numbers of people and finances that takes, I think it's worth our time to continue to make that the number one intention, with the hopes that then sometime we can get back to academics. I think also, though, an intention of mine will continue to be balancing the different populations that we have, the populations that find safety and actually something to do in what we're providing, and also those that can't even think about it and can't get on their computers. So that's, I think, another intention, figuring out how to continue to balance those different groups.
Yeah, those different needs.
Yeah.
In that way. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the last question I'd like to ask is, what's rejuvenating you personally? So what's filling up your cup, given the hard work that you're doing and the stressful work that you're doing these days? What is helping you personally to kind of recharge?
For me, it's my morning workout is number one. Whether I'm on my bike or yoga or Pilates, whatever, that is huge. And daily meditation and my cappuccino.
That sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, great people too. I feel, the fact that there's just such amazing people that I'm working with on a daily basis makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. And that for me, when I bump into someone that I know, like especially on our Thursday night sort and delivery, I get to interact with some of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And my garden has been great for me too. Out digging in the dirt, putting in plants and seeds and growing food that is going to help sustain my family. And I'm hoping to be able to grow enough that I can give some away and help others. So to me, it's just working in the dirt and working, driving around and delivering food to people. It's great.
And lastly, if people are listening and they do want to help this effort and this important work, what are the ways that they could get involved, or what are the ways they could help?
The best way to, if they want to get involved, contact us. And what we need, or what the families need most, is money for utilities and rent. The best way to do that, you can write a check or PayPal or Venmo to Linda Barton. And again, if you want to email me or Facebook message me or whatever, I can give you the details on that. But
And I'll include the links to all that in the description of the episode.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking with me. I really appreciate your time and hearing about the work that you're doing, the important work that you're doing now, and what you're thinking about moving forward. And I think it's an important population that we consider the specific needs, because it is so challenging, and this added layer of culture and this added layer of language on top of everything else we're all considering. So thanks for kind of shedding light on some of those issues. Thank you for joining us at Educators Respond. And again, I've included Lisa's email address in the episode description, and if you are able, please consider making a donation to support these families and students.